My name is Rohina Kabir.
Yes.
There we go. My name is Rohina Kabir, and I'm your host and organizer of today's panel discussion. First and foremost, Ramazan Mubarak. To all of you, welcome to our event today on Afghanistan and COVID-19. We have participants joining us from around the world. We're delighted to have you all join us today for this timely and important discussion. We're particularly honored to have our panelists that have taken time out of their busy schedule to join us from Kabul, Afghanistan. Also, I would like to thank Nilufar Mansouri, who will be moderating today's panel discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's discussion, Nilufar Mansouri. Nilufar Mansouri is a dedicated youth leader in the Afghan community. She graduated from York University after pursuing a double major in political science and philosophy, and will be joining the University of Ottawa Law Class of 2020 this coming September for Nilufar formerly worked for the Minister of Women and Gender Equality, Honorable Mariam Youssef, as the Operations Aide and Stakeholder Manager. Through her efforts in Parliament Hill, she spearheaded the reestablishment of the Parliamentary Friendship Group between Canada and Afghanistan. Aside from politics, Nilufar runs a nonprofit organization, Vitality Sports, and hosts fundraisers to raise money for various causes, including the Umaid Mirmoon orphanage in Kabul. Nilufar continues to utilize her platform to empower racialized women in hopes of breaking down barriers and stereotypes, especially for Afghan and Muslim women. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Nilufar Mansouri to moderate today's panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Rohina John. Salam. Hello, everybody. Thank you specifically to our panelists for joining in. I know many of you are joining in from Kabul, Afghanistan, and we really appreciate that you're taking the time, especially right before your iftar. We'll try to make this as quick as possible. I know we're on a little bit of a time limit. Rohina John, first off, thank you so much to you as a youth leader in our community for putting this important discussion and conversation together. This is something that needs to be spoken about, and to have experts and professionals in the field who will be talking about this matter to us today, that is very, very crucial. Obviously, we know that Afghanistan has faced decades of war, and something like this, a pandemic, only makes their struggle even more difficult. So it's especially important that we have a panel of various experts, including doctors, economists, representatives from the UNHCR, USAID, and so much more. Before we begin and before we introduce our panelists, I'd just like to thank any of the frontline workers, also the youth leaders and organizations that have tuned in today. I have heard that we have completely maxed out on the amount of participants and registrations, which is wonderful. We hope that we'll be able to answer the questions that you've had and the questions that you're concerned about surrounding COVID-19 and Afghanistan. So without further ado, I wanted to first give you an idea and biography of each of the panelists that we have with us today. I will start off by introducing Frishta Karim. Frishta Karim is the director of Charmars, a Kabul-based NGO dedicated to promoting critical thinking among children through providing resources and space on buses turned to mobile libraries. She previously worked with UN agencies, international organizations, and the Afghan government. Frishta John studied political science at Punjab University, India, and public policy at the Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford. We're also joined by Shoaib Rahim. Shoaib Rahim is a development practitioner and analyst on national and regional political economy. Rahim holds an MSc Master of Science degree in development at the prestigious University of Sussex. Before obtaining his Master of Science, Shoaib worked as an enterprise development specialist for a World Bank funded program at the Ministry of Rural Development. Shoaib Rahim also has experience working as economic development advisor for USAID. Aisha Khurram. Aisha Khurram is a youth activist who was born in Peshawar, Pakistan, and currently lives in Kabul. Ms. Khurram won the title of the Afghan Youth Representative to the United Nations on October 7th, 2019, making her the first Afghan youth female representative to the United Nations. Ms. Khurram is in her third year of undergraduate law and political science at Kabul University. Nader Farhad is currently the Associate Public Information and Liaison Officer at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Afghanistan. UNHCR's operation in Afghanistan focuses primarily on facilitating the voluntary repatriation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan and Iran in their sustainable reintegration in Afghanistan, as well as repatriation of internally displaced Afghans. Last but absolutely not least, we have Dr. Mohammed Jawed Hashmi. Dr. Hashmi is a surgeon, lecturer, and currently in charge of COVID-19 patients at the Aliabad Teaching Hospital. Mohammed Jawed Hashmi is part of the Afghan National Standard Authority as the Director of Health and Medical Equipment Standard Development. So we will now go into the questions. We obviously have a very wonderful panel with experienced and knowledgeable individuals. Rohina John, did you want to say anything before we begin?
Go ahead, Neil. I'm sorry.
That's it. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll start off with Frishta John, Ms. Kareem. We wanted to ask you about education. Education is key to nation building, and COVID-19 has become another barrier for Afghans to gain consistent education. Ms. Kareem, can you talk about the existing barrier and how COVID-19 has aggravated the situation for children, students, to attain proper education? Can you also provide input on the Ministry of Education's response to COVID-19?
Hello. Do you have me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sure. Before going on education, I'd like to point out two important things that often we forget talking about it. Is first thing that this pandemic is bringing to children is the issue of hunger. A lot of children, if half of the country is below the poverty line and it's impacting, the pandemic is impacting economy, it's also impacting children. Do they have access to food or not? And also they're in the most important years of their life where they need food for their mental and for their brain growth and also for their physical growth, and they're not having that. So that itself is a big problem that often is not discussed. And also the second and the biggest problem is the issue of child protection. Globally, data shows that a lot of children who are facing abuse and sexual abuse, it happens inside their homes. And when children are locked inside their homes because of the quarantine, they're not going out to schools, what happens to them inside their homes? The global experts are expecting a rise in harms being done to children inside their homes globally, and they're looking to find out data on that. But the same can happen in Afghanistan. And if other developed countries are having same concerns, I believe that we should also have the similar concerns, understanding that children in Afghanistan are a lot more vulnerable to sexual abuses because we are not having much system to help them report those sexual abuses or to have the governmental support if they're facing it. So these are two important issues before moving to the third issue, which is the issue of education. Why I mentioned the first two issues, because often we think of children and we think of education, but their food and their safety comes first. They should have food and safety, then only they can study. And third thing about their study, just to say quickly that we have 10 million children who are going to school, but now almost all of them are out of school. The Ministry of Education has tried to, like many other countries, it has tried to have few programs using radio channels and using TV. But of course, we know that electricity is a huge problem. And in big cities, basically Ministry of Education's reports, 90% of Afghans have access to electricity, but in rural areas, only around 10% of Afghans have access to electricity. And from big cities, the cities that have the highest access to electricity is Kabul, Herat, and Kabul, Herat, and Balkh. The others it goes down to other cities. But then with regards to learning, it's not just about providing them some programs in TV. It includes a lot of other factors. Do they have a proper learning space at home? Do they have other facilities in their home? Do they have proper environment? Do they have motivation to study from TV, because it's such a new thing. So all of these issues are joining hands to make learning extremely difficult for children at this time. But the good news is the Ministry of Education is trying to experiment with different things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Farishta John, for all of the information. And I absolutely agree. Hunger is the first and foremost, most important topic that should be discussed. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Moving on to Dr. Hashmi, I wanted to ask you if it's possible for an overview of the severity of COVID-19 cases in Afghanistan. Obviously, the news coverage will probably not get as much information for us as frontline workers like yourself. How prepared is Afghanistan, and how severe are these cases?
Thank you, Niloufar. Good morning to everyone in Canada, and also good evening to all of those who are living in Kabul. Actually, if officially we are talking that the number of confirmed cases in Afghanistan is more than 1,829. It is the latest news that we have received today at 4 p.m. in which 1,523 is active. In total, we have 59 deaths, and also we have more than 247 recovered patients yet. This is what officially we are talking about. But unofficially, if we are saying that we have more than 50,000 cases just in Kabul, you know better that Afghanistan has more than 34 provinces, and we have received a report from the 33 provinces. We didn't get any report, anything from Nuristan province, which is in the hand of Taliban. So we are not, still right now, we don't have any case there. But if we can say that totally today, we have screened or we have tested, sample collected, more than 9,025 samples has been collected. From these total cases, we have 1,829. This is all that because we have just 6 labs, which is 2 labs we have in Kabul, also in Herat, Kunduz, not Kunduz, Mazar Sharif, and also in Jalalabad and Paktia. From these different labs, we are receiving these reports. But right now, the cases and the severity is very high in Kabul. Because the first thing that the Afghanistan people, they are not supporting. They're actually, if we are trying to say that stay at home, or if we are saying that wear the mask or wash your hands, they're not actually not helping us. So this is the problem. And the second one is that most of these people, they are not reporting to the hospitals or the collection labs. But actually, this is not their fault. The biggest problem, as I said, that we have the lackage of laboratories, and also we have the lackage of kits. In the first, at the beginning, WHO has 1,500 kits to check out that we have the COVID-19 or not. But soon it has been finished. And right then, the government from the president office, we got 50,000 more kits. But the problem is that the kit is not only sufficient for these things. We need a solution, which is RNA extraction. RNA extraction is the main component that we can do or perform these tests. But right now we are facing the shortage, and it's not here. So if I can say that now, according to our vision and according to our committee, which we are talking on them every day, we have more than 55,000 confirmed cases just in Kabul. And if we collect them from all over the Afghanistan, from these 33 provinces, so we will have more than 2 lakhs confirmed cases. And if we talk about the severity, so right now we have more than 59 deaths. So according to overall, it's not that bad. if we confirm them to other our neighbors countries, or if we see the Europe and America, that the mortality rate is very high. And fortunately, that in these right now 1525 cases that we have actively in Kabul, in Afghanistan, the severity is not that much high. And right now, today at the 4 p.m., we received that more than 12 patients are in critical position, are severe patients which need the medicals more facilities, just like they need the ventilator, a machine which is giving the artificial air or breathing to the patients, which is needed. So right now, it's not that much a big problem. But from the next week, Afghanistan government is going to they are going to enlarge this situation, and they are decided to settle some many labs in the Kabul. So for this, that totally, and they right now today we can confirm not more than 300 cases. Just 300 cases is the final cases that we can check out. But from the next week, maybe we will be able to perform more than 1,500 up to 2,000 cases to collect the samples and to test them. So for this, we are seeing that every day we can get more than 4,000 positive, more than 4 or 5,000 positive cases. So this will get a catastrophic. I, I can say that it will face a challenge to the medical situation. All of you know that despite that we had spent more than billions of dollars in the health workers, but unfortunately the health system is extremely weak around the region. So the main problem is that we don't have enough facilities, we don't have enough machineries, we don't have enough good workers to treat them. And also the biggest problem is that nowadays our own doctors, they are scared of them. Their private clinics is completely off. They are not working in the hospitals, and even we are sending them the notice to come and join your duty. But unfortunately, they are saying that no, my life is better. So I want to save my life, not to the others. So this is a big problem that we are facing. So if this happens, so I think we cannot control this kind of pandemic in Afghanistan, and we will lose more than 200,000 people in Afghanistan, which are we're expecting that if the pandemic get grossly all over the Afghanistan, and they may be there will be a lot of a big challenge for us, and we will lose more than 2,100 people just in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Dr. Saib. Thank you for all of the information and also for all the work that you're doing. I assume that you yourself, because you're dealing with the patients at Ali Abad Teaching Hospital, you're also putting yourself at risk. And for that, we thank you so much as a frontline worker. I would like to next ask, in regards to, as Dr. Hashmi mentioned, because there is such a big impact on individuals in Afghanistan, can Mr. Rahim give us an idea of the damages and the effect that this has had on Afghanistan's economy? Is Shwaib Rahim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. Do you mind turning your video on?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us an idea of the impact that this has on Afghanistan's economy, especially the numbers that you just heard, I'm sure it's concerning and very worrying.
Yeah, first of all, let me thank and congratulating you for this organizing this event, particularly giving due importance to economic perspective, because the media and other outlets are not giving due attention to economic side of it. See the COVID-19 outbreak, it might peak in next 2 to 3 months, or maybe 4 months, or let's say till end, it will be controlled till December 2020. But let me tell you that unfortunately the impacts of the economic impacts will be there even after that. At the moment we are focusing, like Dr. Seb also discussed, that we are forcing and asking people not to come out and stay home, but they're not cooperating. But we have to be realistic on this perspective, because if you're living in a country where 54% people are living below poverty line, and you're living in a country where people have very poor savings, it's very difficult to ask them to stay home. We don't have facilities like United States where people where they get money from the government. Even in our neighboring countries, if you talk about India and Pakistan, from perspective of savings, if you compare savings of people, we Afghans lie at the bottom in terms of percentage of people who are making significant amount of saving. Post 2014, the economy is already struggling, and the job opportunities were limited. Imagine 40% or more than 40% of people unemployed. Um, in that situation, this is going to add further to that. So it's difficult to ask people to stay home. Similarly, the those people who are having jobs, their income has been low. It has been so low that they have not been able to have the enough nutrition. They have not been able to have enough living standard. This is why, based on the study of Afghanistan Statistics and Information Authority, for 54% people were reported before poverty line, below poverty, extreme poverty line. The numbers I'm sharing with you there from data from 2016 and 17. Imagine what would have happened as the economies struggle to grow in the following 2 to 3 years. Now that the economy has come to a standstill position, the things are going to get worse. The job market was already struggling, the incomes were already struggling. We are in a complete troubling situation. If I tell you the breakdown of the already existing situation of poverty across Afghanistan, so what has been happening is that, like, out of the total population in the rural areas, which forms around 70% of our total population, 80% of people, 80% in the rural areas, they are ranked as poor people living below poverty line, struggling to meet their basic needs. That is on the public side. In order to tackle this situation, the other governments, they have their own policies. They come up with fiscal stimulus, which in layman's terms would mean that the governments, they come up with their fiscal policies where they're making you mobilizing their own financial resources to address the situation. So they are making direct payments to people, direct transfer to their accounts. They're giving tax rebate or relaxation and relief to people, and then they're coming up with other financial tools through their financial sector to tackle the situation and ease the negative impacts and the ramifications that it bears. Unfortunately, Afghan government does not have that capacity because last year, out of 399 billion Afghani budget, Afghan government could contribute or slightly more than 50% of it. Now imagine if the revenue, if economy comes to a standstill, your trade is not there, so you're not getting revenue from your trade, from customs. And then since your businesses are struggling, you cannot push them for, they don't have business activity. And in that particular case, you cannot ask them for returns. On the job markets part, a larger market has been informal sector. People working in informal sector, in informal businesses, most of them coming from rural areas. So what has happened that, like Kabul and regional hubs, Mazar, Kandahar, Herat, and Jalalabad, these regional hubs have come to stand still, which are, these regional hubs have been responsible for creating job, providing revenues, and somehow mobilize the economy of the surrounding provinces. As they have come to a standstill, this has negatively affected these surrounding provinces, whether it is unskilled labor in the construction industry, whether they're workers working at different restaurants, they're workers working in the formal sector, in the banking sector and other areas, they have been, or education sector, they have been struggling with that. The worst part of Afghanistan has been that, like, a lot of businesses, they have started to lay off people, which is going to add to unemployment, and most of them have reduced the incomes. And this situation is leading to a more horrible situation. Based on World Bank data, the current pandemic is going to push 45 million people across the world into extreme poverty, and 10% of them will be in countries like Afghanistan, which are fragile and conflict-affected country. So unfortunately, we are already in trouble, and the forthcoming situation is going to be even more concerning, and the ramifications could be dire if sufficient and steps are not taken.
Thank you so much for that breakdown, Mr. Rahim. Last month, the U.S. State Department had suggested that they're going to cut $1 billion in aid to Afghanistan because of the difficult political situation that we're currently in. My next question is to Ms. Khurram. How do you think that COVID-19 will impact the Afghan peace process?
First of all, thank you very much. A very good morning to moderators and a very good evening to all participants of this panel discussion in Kabul. Certainly, the COVID-19 has disrupted many national and international engagements of Afghanistan, but some of them are so vital that they cannot be postponed, such as the peace process, and I'm glad that we have this discussion today to discuss about the impacts that the COVID-19 has on the peace process. I personally believe that this virus could not hit Afghanistan in a more worse situation than the one that we have right now. Because the situation, the political situation, the economic situation, the healthcare system, all these elements that are essential to be developed, to be very responsive in such kind of crisis situation, are in a very bad situation. But in a country that is still underdeveloped, it's very difficult to deal both with the cost of war and with a global health crisis at this moment. And the window of opportunity for the intra-Afghan talks, which was opened after the US-Taliban agreement in February 2020, may soon be closing because of the whole situation that is happening. And I will directly come to some points that I believe this COVID-19 virus impacted the Afghan peace process. First of all, I guess the most huge impact this COVID-19 that would have on the Afghan peace process will originate from US. Because US will shift its priorities, and certainly they are facing with a very critical situation right now. So their focus would be inward on their domestic issues, and mostly they will focus on their healthcare system and the economic situation that will face economic recession and even depression after in the post-pandemic situation. And at the same time, they will certainly cut funding to most foreign adventures of US, and especially Afghanistan. This was what the government wanted at first from the beginning, but at this critical moment in time, the Congress will help them, help the government to actually fulfill the wish of the US government to pull out their troops and cut their funding to foreign adventures such as their intervention in Afghanistan. And at the same time, the travel restrictions and lockdowns and all around the world are complicating the situation. Because we had a delegation that were discussing about the prisoner swap, and that was conducted through online conferences, and that was also something I guess needed to be done in face-to-face negotiations and discussions. And certainly the intra-Afghan negotiations could not be conducted through the online or video conferences, and that would not be possible, and that would not be efficient, and therefore there's certainly this restriction will have a huge impact on the intra-Afghan negotiation. And at the same time, as there was a news recently that the President Trump's advisors asked for the immediate drawdown of US troops from Afghanistan and even from the Middle East. So this means that there will be a power balance would be shifting in Afghanistan, and Taliban will certainly try to make most out of it. And this prisoner swap issue is, if it continues to take a long time, it will both impact the prisoners and it will also endanger the future of the inter-Afghan negotiations. And right now, we are witnessing a political crisis inside the government, and there is a struggle over power sharing issues between the two presidential candidates. And the government is consuming its energy to mostly discuss or get engaged in political disputes rather than to consume its issues to fight COVID-19. At the same time, Taliban are trying to launch campaigns in certain parts of the country that are under their control to contain and manage the COVID-19. And by this, they're trying to prove that they're not only competing with the government in battlefield, but also they're competing them and governance. And by this, they're slowly trying to convince US that look, we could be a good partner, and we are the ones who can serve your interests better than the government, the current government. And because they are more efficient and they are certainly more cheaper to the US. As we have witnessed that over the last few months, they have attacked our military personnel in different parts of the country. And it shows that they have a very little political will or will at all to leave or to give up on the military solution and embrace negotiations. And I guess they are considering the US Taliban agreement, which was signed in February 2020, just as a piece of paper that cannot and will not make them give up on their permanent goal and a long-held belief and stance that they had so far. We also will see a very huge impact of this COVID-19 on the Afghanistan's engagement in regional and international platforms, because the future of Afghanistan was about connectivity. But right now, as we see this COVID-19, it's all about distance. So it will certainly impact both from the economic situation, economic perspective, and from the political perspective. It will impact the whole political dynamics in Afghanistan. But at the same time, I guess there is a golden opportunity that this COVID-19 offered to both the government and the Taliban. And this opportunity is that both government and Taliban can unify behind a common, behind a unified cause, behind a mutual, to fight against a mutual enemy, which is COVID-19, and that is actually threatening everyone's life. Because more than 62% of our country's territory is indirectly under the Taliban's control, and Afghan government cannot step into the places that Taliban are controlling them. So they will definitely need Taliban support and assistance to fight COVID-19. And for this, I believe if both sides like genuinely work together for the sake of the well-being of people and for the sake of the future of this nation, this will provide a unique opportunity to build a bottom-up approach towards the Afghan peace process, and that would be a genuine approach as well.
Thank you so much, Aisha John, and thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. We're so proud of you. You're such a wise young woman, and hopefully, as you said, this golden opportunity in regards to the mutual enemy of COVID-19 will have a little bit of a silver lining in what proves to be a very difficult situation. My next question is for Mr. Nader Farhat. The New York Times Magazine cover story last week highlighted the thousands of Afghans who are crossing the border over from Iran. One of the photos showed over 10,000 people crossing over. You at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Afghanistan and you focus on the repatriation of Afghan refugees from Iran, a hot zone for the coronavirus. What has the coronavirus done to your day-to-day practice, and what can you tell us about the repatriation of Afghan refugees?
Thank you. I think I hope you can hear me. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, indeed, return to Afghanistan is not a new phenomena. It has been happening all along for the past many decades. But there is there's, let me just a little bit explain the process of return to Afghanistan, which is taking place in, of two categories of Afghan population from the neighboring countries, particularly Iran and Pakistan. One caseload of Afghans that is registered Afghan refugees, that is UNHCR's responsibility in a way for their return and sustainable reintegration in Afghanistan. This is a group that is registered and living as refugees in Iran and in Pakistan. But at the same time, we have around 2.4 million Afghans that are living as undocumented Afghans or as economic migrants, primarily in Iran and Pakistan. So the group that you're returning to in the past 1 month, or 2 months rather, since March, we have seen a tremendous increase, is those that were never registered, and those Afghans that are living in Iran primarily as undocumented Afghans, those who were there for work opportunities, for employment opportunities, for better living conditions probably. So all other reasons except for a refugee reason that they are there. But having said that, these are Afghans, they are part of this population, they are our countrymen. Their return and their sustainable reintegration in Afghanistan is part of a job that not only UN, but also the government and the others are involved in trying to support them. So more specifically, yes, we have seen an increase in the number of returns. In the past 2 months, over 240,000 people have repatriated to their country. This is more from Iran. These are the individuals, primarily young single males that were there for, as I said, for employment reasons. The reasons they have cited on their return back to their country is primarily fears of COVID and the disease, the coronavirus in Iran, as well as the tremendous impact, the socioeconomic impact of it in Iran on the Afghan populations, also in Pakistan. So primarily the decision for them to come back has been driven by fears of the coronavirus, as well as loss of their job opportunities. In Afghanistan, unfortunately, they're not returning to a better situation when they come back to their country, especially as they when they make the decisions, rather in hasty decisions are being made by them, and when they come back to their country. Although the number has recently stabilized, we have seen between 1,000 to 1,000 to 1,700 or almost 2,000 daily returning from the two main crossing points, which is Islam Kala in the western region of Herat, as well as Milak or Zaranj province, from Nimruz province. The two official crossing points. The numbers has decreased, but unfortunately the spread of the coronavirus or the virus within the country has increased. Unfortunately, the numbers Dr. Saib has just given us the number that I made a rough calculation. What does that mean actually for the population of 36 million, or I don't know, 38 million Afghans? So just over 9,000 Afghans have been tested, or samples have been taken, and of whom, if I understood the number, is a little less than 1,900 individuals. So that means well over probably or 20% of the tested samples have been positive. Now, God forbid, this if more testing kits are available, probably the number will rapidly increase among those who will be confirming positive across the country, which is certainly not what we are hoping for. But the main concerns as far as UNHCR is concerned is the border crossing points with the large number of population that are coming back to their country. They are not, let me bring a distinction here, they are not registered refugee population as such. So in other words, they do not necessarily fall under the mandate of UNHCR. Of that caseload of Afghans that are registered as refugees in Iran and Pakistan, only about 200 people have repatriated to their country. The 240,000 plus are those that are not refugees but rather economic migrants. In-country testing capacity, the limited of that is also another issue that we as a humanitarian agency is looking at it as a matter of concern, as well as protective equipment for frontline workers. As you know, the two crossing points we are helping the government of Afghanistan to be able to do a better monitoring of the population when they come back to their country, who these people are, what are the reasons for their return, how in terms of their vulnerability and how soon they can be reintegrated back into their communities. Unfortunately, the caseload, the group that we are talking about is making well over 10 million Afghans we are talking about. So in the past 17 to 18 years, 6 million Afghans have repatriated, at least under the UNHCR volunteer repatriation program. Those are the people that have somehow benefited from the assistance, and we do have a record of this population that have come back. And now, at the same time, we have around 2 million displaced Afghans that are living in Afghanistan because of the conflict or because of the other reasons that have left or that are fleeing their communities, their villages. They're coming into larger cities and bigger cities of the country for better socioeconomic opportunities that they have. So at the moment, we are talking about a really roughly a big chunk of the population that have or that are currently living in displacement in Afghanistan that are in need of assistance, and those who have repatriated in more recent years. So what is needed, as all the other panelists talked about, the socioeconomic impact of this COVID-19 has been is already a lot, and the potential a lot for enormous impact of it on the population, that quite a large number of them living below the poverty line in the country. So this population, we are already talking about 2 million people that have fled their homes because of the conflict in their villages and are living in the areas that are in most needs of the assistance. So what we are worried about, and what we are worried about, is pretty much their extremely lack of access to basic services such as potable water, such as shelter, such as protection needs that they have, and at least opportunities for them to be able to reintegrate back into their communities. If they're unable to go back to their home villages because of the conflict, wherever they are, they have got to be assisted. And these assistance is quite vital for them to be reached out, but the needs remain very, very great, unfortunately, in the country. And what we are all doing is collectively as the UN to ensure that at least people who are in dire need can be assisted, can be reached out with some sort of assistance, and that people will be able to benefit from at least a small scale humanitarian projects in order to have some sort of possibility for an income or an earning for their families. Let me stop over, and then we can further talk about it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Farhad, for all of the information. You brought up a very important point about protective equipment for frontline workers. So I would like to turn the conversation over to Dr. Hashmi. Dr. Saib, how has this impacted your day-to-day practice? In terms of medical equipment, what happens if there's a medical supply shortage or personal protective equipment shortage? What are the alternative choices that are being considered? Has anyone thought to bring supplies from abroad? Are you already getting supplies from abroad? And if this is already an issue and equipment is already short, what alternatives have been put in place?
Well, unfortunately, as I told you that PP protective equipment is already short, and we are shorting for more than 2 months. That we are facing enemy without any arms, without any weapon. So it's very important that PPE is very important for our health workers. That currently we are not having them. We talk to the government. The government is saying that the PPE, if we are providing them from the outside, so it will cost too much. And just a disposable PPE will cost more than 45 US dollars. But right now they are they are working with some local companies who are making inside the countries. They are making from some source of cloths a PPE, which is not that much effective. But in current situation that we don't have so much active cases, it's not that much bad, and it's costing for more than 5 US dollars to us. The important thing is that not the medical equipments cannot survive someone. The important thing is that we must have something preventive planning for them, that the COVID-19 we should disease or decrease the rate. As I told you that the main problem is that testing the COVID-19 kits is a big issue. First, I told you that we have more than 55,000 kits to perform them, but the problem is that we don't have the RNA extractor solution, which is very important. The second thing is that mostly the people, when they are coming to our hospital or they are coming to the collecting points, right now in Kabul, just we have one hospital for these patients who are active or who can be admitted to hospital. It's named Afghan Japan. It's a contagious hospitals for all the diseases, not for just COVID-19, but all contagious diseases, which it's also allocated for these diseases. COVID-19 have more than, Afghan Japan hospital have more than 100 beds for these patients. So, and they have just 5 ventilators inside the hospitals. Ventilators, I told you, is machine that someone is having difficulty in breathing. So it's giving them respiration, or it's throwing them some air to expand their lungs or to have the breathe. The most important thing in our hospital is that we don't have the PPE. The second thing is that we don't have enough budget to fight. The third one is that we don't have enough ventilators. In all over Afghanistan, we have just 300 ventilators. And right now, maybe more than 65 are inside the Kabul. And these are all belongs to ICU projects. If you are collecting all these ventilators from these, we have a lot of patients besides the COVID-19. We have some patients who are needed, who need these machines. So we cannot take them from off. So right now, currently, we have 25 ventilators, which are for the patients or who are affected with COVID-19. But right now, the government is trying to buy more than 500 ventilators, which may be available on the next 2-3 weeks. So these things. And according to the others, if we have facing the problems of the PPE, it's important. I think it's nowadays every country is facing the same problem. We talked to China. China told that okay, we will give you around thousands PPE for you. They will provide them, but these are not that much the good quality. So we must use them just as for a single day. In these things which we are using for a single days in Afghanistan, it's not working. Right now we have some equipments which is single use, just like the example is like a mask. When we are using the N95 mask, it is a single disposable mask. But unfortunately, these we are using them for more than 5 or 6 months. For 6 days, 7 days. And right now in Kabul, especially in markets, we cannot get the N95 masks. So we are using the simple masks, and the hospital is also providing a simple mask to us, which is not that much effective. So this is the main reason that our doctors, they are not interested to treat these patients. And secondly, the basic problems is we don't have enough staff for these hospitals. According to our calculations, that we have for each 10,000 patients, we have 3 doctors and 3 nurses, which is not effective. I will give you a single example that right now the government has decided to give us to our hospitals the Kabul University hostel and also the Polytechnic dormitories and hostels, which is more than 9,000 beds. But I have 500 staffs for these. So how can I divide these 500 staffs for 9,000 beds? So it's impossible. And beside these 9,000 beds, we need at least 1,000 ventilators, which is impossible for the government to provide them. So I'm saying that if the people and the staffs they get people in the media did not support us and did not tell the people that stay at home and bring this rate of contagiousness or decrease the rate of the spreading of the COVID-19, so we will face a catastrophic problems or issues which will be unable for us to control. I told you that more than 55,000 people are right now, they are infected with COVID-19, but we have the ability to receive just 300 of them. For this, in 300, we are then dividing them into Afghan Japan, and also some of them we are isolating to other hospitals. Just right now, we are shorting the place, the beds, the ventilators, other supporting machineries, staff, medicines, drugs. They are all of them are shortage. Example, just I can say that some of the medicine which is not that much effective for the COVID-19, but from the social media, the people are getting that if I can take just like hydroxychloroquine is a tablet, which is actually for anti-malaria, but Wuhan said or China said that is effective on COVID-19. You can see that right now we don't have these drugs in market. If we are needed, if we need these drugs for someone, we cannot find them because it's a kind of shortage. The people are taking them for without having a good knowledge about this. So it's a big issue. And right now, if we can get the PPE from the outside, it's very important. Some medical stuff, some ventilators, or some other kits, which is very important. Right now, it's very short. We cannot, we don't have them inside the Kabul. So I hope that the government make a strategy that to bring these things or to provide these things for the medical staff, which is very important. Otherwise, we will lose a lot of medical staff. Right now, we more than 122 medical staffs are affected all over in Afghanistan. So this is what they are decreasing the morale of the doctors. And if we are saying that join the hospitals, come to the hospital, as I say to you, that most of the doctors, we are sending them the notice to please join the hospital. They are saying that, okay, provide us PP. We don't have, provide them a good place to be isolated from the patients. We don't have these things, or provide a good even food, which is not available in the hospitals. So that will be a big challenge for us. Let's see that the government nowadays, they're trying to make a good strategies. Just one of the strategies is that the next weeks they are going to increase the test rates or take the sampling or swabbing of the people. So which will be more than 4,000 or 5,000 people will be tested in a day. Then that time we can receive a great amount of the patients and these things. Another thing that most of them, Afghanistan people, they have a kind of idea that if you are infected with the COVID-19, hospitals cannot help you. Just stay at home. And they are staying at home, they are dying there, and we don't have any report about this. So a lot of problems are here in the medical equipment. As I told you that we are the weakest health workers in the region. And it's not that our knowledge is not that much good. It's that we don't have any facilities. And these facilities, if we are talking that, okay, the government will do like that, the government will do like this. No, actually government is, they are busy with something else, just like they're fighting with each others. As I told you that the main problem is that in some rural areas, which is under control of Taliban, we cannot reach them. We cannot provide the health facilities to them. It's also a big challenge. And besides, also the government is busy with their own works. Actually, they are showing themselves like a champions, like a heroes. Every day they are showing themselves in the media. They are talking about a lot of things, like we have a good ICU, we have a good hospitals, but the actual and the realistic, we say that we don't have anything. So it's a big problem for us, and hope if something happens. The government has give us a lot of promises that we will do that, this, if they can provide them. And again, that only things that we can provide or we can take some things from the outside is just the military base, military forces they can bring. Example, if we need something from the Canada or from America, we don't have international flights. So the best thing is that they can bring them through military planes, which is a good idea for them. And we have a lot. Some in a lot of times before we which were when we are facing these problems, military was helping us. They were bringing something from the Germany or from the US to the Afghanistan. Let's hope for the better, or let's hope that if we have a good machineries inside Afghanistan, when we can provide a good health services to our nation.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Hashmi, for all of the information and for giving us an idea of what's really happening on the ground. At this time, I realize that it's time to iftar for those of you who are in Kabul. Rohina, John is suggesting that we take a 15-minute break. How do you feel about that? Hi, everybody. We're going to reconvene, so I hope that all of our panelists and participants are back. خدا کنه که افطار خوب داشته باشین. Let's see if everyone's on. We'll continue to the next question. So we left off with Dr. Hashmi, who was telling us about the protective equipment, the shortage, the lack of budget, and the difficulties that they're facing right now with certain promises from the government that have not yet been delivered. I want to move on by asking about the approach and strategy to maintain a stable economy during this unprecedented crisis. So, Mr. Rahim, Shuaib Rahim, if you wouldn't mind touching on this subject, especially in regards to obviously budgeting around medical supplies and as well as the economy as a whole, what is the projection also of the Afghan market in the next couple of months?
The country, the parts which are in the winter season, they wait for the summer where the economic activities begin, where the agricultural activities you speed up, and that's where people start moving. If you talk about Kabul only, so Kabul in winter it is relatively quiet. Most of the people who have options to travel from outside Kabul, when children are off, they go out of Kabul and they stay there vacations. During summer, Kabul is at full bloom. People return, economic activities increase, and the duration of the days also increase compared to the winter season. That's where the rest of the weddings begin in the in the wedding halls, where the restaurants businesses are at the top, the coffee shops, the short course institutes, English language and others, they're all back in the action. Unfortunately, it came at a time where economy was just taking off during the summer after a month of Hamal. And that has severely affected the whole chain of activities, including business activities, the start of new businesses, the launch of new businesses. That has been severely affected. Um, Coming to the parts that government could do, if you look at the 5 years of the government, so one of the key problems that we are facing today in the market is because of some of the missed opportunities by Afghan government, and we are paying the cost for that at the moment. For instance, for last 5 years, the Afghan government has been telling us that we are no more dependent on Pakistan, and our transit and trade there is all coming from through Pakistan, through Iran. But I was doing the calculation and analysis based on the revenues that we get from the customs. 30% of our cargo is still through Iran, and 30% is still to Pakistan. And this is one of the major reasons why today we are in trouble, because the cargo in Pakistan that is interrupted. More than 7,000 containers are stuck in Pakistan, which are which were supposed to reach Afghanistan and to be distributed in Afghanistan. Now, while they are being held behind there, we are already having supply shortages there, and they are being charged every day. They are paying demurrage charges for each single day they spend time at the port. What is going to happen is that they will first reach with delay. We are already facing shortages. The vegetable prices, like the major items like onions, potatoes, tomatoes, their price have doubled. The poultry products are in shortage. So even if they reach, the prices in the market would be very high. That is one of the major problems that we have at the moment. Other than that, if the government was supposed to build major cold storage facilities in all four regions of Afghanistan and Kabul, and it was a $28 million project. Unfortunately, the project went missing, and we haven't heard anything about it since 2016, and that is why we are facing food shortages. If we had all these five storage facilities active and in place today, we would not be that much worried about the shortage of food supplies in the market, particularly fruits and vegetables that we are facing at the moment. And thirdly, the government's approach towards the air corridors. Now we see that it's not the air corridors which is giving us a lifeline, but Chabahar could have been a very good alternative to provide supplies to the country, and that is why the market is struggling a great deal. Plus, our market, we have market economy. There is a lot of criticism among public, but technically speaking, market economy in itself might not be that bad. There could be a lot of discussions we could do a lot about its pros and cons. But apart from that, if you look at if you're not regulating your market, if you're not putting rules, regulations, and basic mechanisms to regulate the market in place, so you cannot blame the market in itself. Unfortunately, if we talk about Afghanistan's constitution, Article 10 of the constitution talks about the establishment of market economy. Article 13 and 14, it talks about regulation and protection of consumer rights. Unfortunately, the laws, regulations, and policies to regulate the market are not in place, and that is why mechanisms are not in place, which is making the price control mechanisms in the market very difficult. Now, where we stand at the moment is that the economy was already struggling. Like we were facing unemployment, poverty, and lack of consumption, and lack of income opportunities, and reduced incomes across the countries. What this has done is that this has affected the private sector severely. When a university closes down, when a school closes down, when the restaurants close down, these people, thousands of people that have been working in formal and informal sector, a significantly large portion working in informal sector, they are closed down. So obviously they're not getting their salaries, they're not getting their income. What they are doing at the moment is they might be either borrowing or consuming whatever little bit savings they have. So 2 months later, as the markets open, or maybe 3 months or 4 months later, which even still is difficult to fully open, given the fragile health sector and health infrastructure that we have in place. That is going to be very difficult, and the only option we have to stick to is to staying home no matter what happens, because the health infrastructure and facilities are really weak. So what I see in the forthcoming months is that the markets, 2 months back, like back in February, where the markets were standing, I'm not sure if the market will be back even at the end of 2020, because the losses that the fragile and nascent private sector has faced, the manufacture, the number of industries that have been operational, it will take them time to recover. Plus, the consumption and the demand in the market has dropped, because when the income has declined, when people don't have enough savings, this certainly is going to affect the demand in the market. Third important factor is psychological factor, behavioral factor. So for next 3 to 4 months or 5 months, and once the COVID-19 declines in Afghanistan and the graph peaks and then drops, probably I was looking at the report of Singapore Institute, they were talking about September and October. So if it drops after that, psychologically people will not be fit and ready to invest in different sectors, to spend money on different activities, decoratory pots, to buy vehicles, or decoration of houses. For instance, this year on Eid, now Afghanistan is a major dry fruit producer. So we consume it at home, we export it. What has happened now that during Eid, not many people would be spending a lot on the dry fruits that are locally and that are traditionally available in the market. Plus, export option is also missing. So these farmers, they are going to go through huge losses this year, unfortunately. What is the policy option for us, and what is the budgeting options for us? Unfortunately, in Afghanistan, we have law of access to information, but government is not providing information in detailed manner, on timely manner. I was looking at the report of the first meeting that was held at with presidential palace, where the line ministries were participating, and it was really disappointing to see the approaches there and the plans they had. So the Ministry of Agriculture is telling us that, well, everything is fit. 80% of items, they're not perishable. The rest of the 20% items which are perishable, we have arrangements for that. We all know this is not realistic. We all know our agriculture infrastructure, our storage facility, and our marketing ability. The same Ministry of Commerce and Industry, he was supposed to talk about Afghan economy, how the trade is going to be revived, what the business community has to do. Unfortunately, he's also talking about the beds, which was supposed to be discussed by Minister of Public Health and other entities. So these problems make you even worried. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, the president met with the business community, with private sector representatives, and rather than offering them a way out, any options, he's asking them to and appreciating them for the welfare work, for the donations they're doing, which offers a lot of concern. We all know that this is critical situation, whether you are in US or in India or in China, but the government in these countries, they have been able to come forward and talk to them. Prime Minister Modi, every other day, he's on the media, talking to people, giving them confidence, talking to business community. And their central bank is constantly engaging the media on the forthcoming policies about the interest rates, about the banking systems, about the options for the MSMEs, about tax exemptions. They're talking to them. We don't see any of our ministries. Once or twice in a week, we see posts on presidential palace page, which is very much concerning. So this is the time where the government has to give people confidence. On part of budgeting, of course, budget has to be revised, but how is it going to be revised? It doesn't have to be a quick fix solution. Again, we do have aid for the COVID-19 from European Union. We do have some funding around 100 million or so from IMF. We had 118 million euro, I believe, from European Union. Now, there are three phases that we have to talk about. There was a phase before COVID-19 outbreak reached Afghanistan, and it had its roots strengthened in Afghanistan. That was one of the time, and even that our economy was struggling. Now we are in the crisis situation, which will certainly last, unfortunately, for 4 to 5 months or 6 months at least. And the third phase is once it is over and we start getting normalization thing, we start opening up our economy. So at current moment, it's probably, most probably, it's humanitarian, where we have to focus more on ensuring humanitarian aid. We do know government's capacity, and its institutional capacity and the resources, but which are limited. But the government can mobilize the civil society activists. The government can make, like, if there are announcements from presidential palace and from ministers and deputy ministers that they are giving up some amount of their salary, even if it is just for the sake of publicity, it will give people a new wave of inspiration, of motivation, so that they start coming out. The second one is that public, individuals, civil society organizations, sports stars, and other celebrities, they come forward and start doing these charities which are being done elsewhere in the world. I was watching Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who was doing across all television channels, 80 to 90 channels, he was doing charity even himself and raising funds for that. And this is where we have to come forward from top to bottom, bottom to top, and make sure people have access to basic necessities and basic items of need. This is Ramadan, and I tell you that in next 2 to 3 months, this is going to be the situation. The businesses are off, so we have to reach out most of the people. Coming to the fiscal policy, again, this has to be obviously revised. And in that particular case, our problem has been that when we look at Afghanistan's budget, so 50%, like I mentioned earlier, this is contributed by Afghan government. Last year it was 207 billion Afghani, and the total budget was around $400 billion Afghani. So this revenue streams are going to shrink significantly. I was looking at the data for March, comparing it with March 2018. So the customs revenue for Afghanistan, that has reduced from 6,500 million to somewhere close to 615 million Afghani. So it's more than 90% decline in that. In that particular situation, now government has started to make smart moves. We touched upon the budget issues and budget reduction issues to reach out these partners and engage them how we can make use of IMF, what we could get from World Bank, what we could get from the United States, and what we could get from other partners and international organizations. So these are going to be critical issues, important issues that we have to consider. Plus, how are you going to revise the fiscal policy and the budget that we have in hand for 2020? We already have problems with transparency and accountability of the budget. Last year, Code 91 was a big question on government, where the money of specific code was spent, but they were not able to provide clarification on and provide accountability of the amount that was spent. So when we are going to revise it, how are we going to revise it? Now, for post, we have to make sure we provide enough provisions. For the moment, at present, the government should allow some of the industries and sectors to start operations which don't have supply side problems. If, for example, steel industry, some of industries are very much reliant on electricity. So this is an opportunity for them to have uninterrupted electricity and produce at lower cost. So slowly we could start discussions about it. If not this month, maybe next month. And it could be a smart ease of lockdown. And then after that, we have to plan from now, how are we going to run the economy? What we have been doing, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, that when President Ghani took over, he stopped distribution of land. And with this construction industry was significantly affected, because he wanted to make a land bank. That has been completed, but the construction industry is not there. Now, construction industry has the potential to contribute significantly to 25 other sectors in the economy: labor, cement, bricks, soil, transportation. It's a whole channel of 20 to 25 sectors. Now, what we could do for the post-COVID-19 is like investing on health facilities, making hospitals, on educations and building schools and other infrastructure necessary for the agriculture sector. We could invest and restart the close project of $28 million about the cold storages, and we could build these facilities. In the meantime, the government has to see some of the projects which are not necessary. What usually happens in this kind of situation is governments have been coming up with a response. They technically call it fiscal stimulus. They offer packages, which includes relief and for businesses, for tax, for and they're doing cash transfer. Like in the United States, they're doing 1,200 cash transfer.
I think we have technical difficulties here.
It's not a rush. It's not. There's no rush.
Okay, so we can okay, great. Just turn off his video and come back again. And then Nilo, you could take over. Just unmute you. Here you
go. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll come back to Shoaib John and Mr. Rahim and his last little comment about the revision of fiscal policies. But before we do, I wanted to take the conversation over to Frishta John, Ms. Kareem. Mr. Rahim talked about the economic impact of university and schools closing down. Obviously, the impact is not just economic. We don't know how long this pandemic will last. What are methods that are currently taking place to replace institutional education, especially considering lack of resources such as electronic devices and internet connectivity in Afghanistan? Would you be able to speak on that for us?
Thank you so much, Farjan. I think what's happening is that the government is trying to experiment on different things. But as you know, it's such a new thing for Afghanistan. It's extremely new to experiment with technology, because the government itself hasn't been experiencing it comparing to other countries or comparing to developed countries which have some kind of experience with technology or with teaching online. And also government of Afghanistan is not at all even trying online teaching because internet is a huge problem. So what they're doing is they're using methods that are more possible, such as TV, such as radio, or they're even saying that once the quarantine stops, gets lifted, the lockdown gets lifted in some areas, they will start small schools or small classrooms in certain places, considering the social distancing. Now, how does that work? When teachers are coming on TV, of course, there's issue of electricity. That's a big problem. So what they're saying is that, okay, if there is issue of electricity, we will try to have it through radio. Now, when we are teaching children through radio or through TV, a big issue that comes up, besides the earlier problems that I said in terms of motivation of a child, in terms of the environment at home, whether a child has that environment at home to learn or not, and all those aspects, there comes an issue of quality. How do you ensure that this is a good quality production of TV materials or radio lessons for children? And if you can't ensure that, you're investing a huge amount of money in production of these materials, and you don't even know if it will impact children positively, if it will have significant impacts or not, and what level of impact is considered significant for the government to be sure that it is good enough for the amount of budget that we're investing in. And then there's no way to monitor the impact of it, to make sure that the amount of budget that you're using on learning like this, whether it will have some kind of impact or not, the monitoring system is not clear. Now, within all those things, we have no idea that when the situation will get better. Apparently, it seems that it will take a few more months. And some of the parents at home are thinking that it might finish quite sooner, and they might not take education as seriously. But imagine if it continues for a few more months, what would happen? That one of the huge risks that it would put children in is the issue of dropouts. A lot of children may lose their motivation, especially those of them who are already having low motivations in terms of learning. This will be a good excuse for them to leave the schools. And also for parents who are not highly motivated to send their children, the possibility to not send their children when quarantine has finished would be high. So we are going to have a huge problem of dropouts as well. One of the ways is that as government is trying to figure out within current circumstances on what should be done and what is effective and what's not, we should also consider that when the schools are starting again, how to make sure that all the children would come back and we do not have a high level of dropouts out of school. And when they're coming back to schools, how to make sure to address the issue of children not learning in these months. Can we have short courses for them or not? These are some policy debates that government needs to do. But at the same time, we need to not forget the role of civil society and organizations working for children. They have a huge role in terms of motivating parents, writing for media, going to media, talking to people, and encouraging them to not stop education at this critical situation and try to learn from other countries. One of the the good things about the current situation is that we all are in this together. All countries are in this together. We are having almost similar problems. Always Afghanistan was alone in its problem, whether it was explosion, whether it was insecurity, we were alone. This is the first time that we are together with the world, with the same problem. Or maybe some of the countries are having bigger amounts of problem than us. So maybe in this together problem, we can jointly work with other countries, learn from each other, see what we can do jointly, whether we can have joint programs to help each other in terms of policy decisions. I'll pause here and start later when you have another question. Thank you.
Now we're facing struggle in a way that is very new to us, a pandemic, and especially at a time where things were going well, as Mr. Rahim mentioned, market-wise, we are unfortunately going to have to deal with a really big downfall, and there will be a climb that's necessary after this, where I hope members from the government will be able to support, as well as individuals who are helping charity and nonprofit-wise. So we have 2 more questions left. The next question I will turn over to Mr. Farhad, who was talking to us before about the repatriation of Afghans who had returned from Iran. We wanted to know, there have been more than 115,000 Afghans who returned from Iran just between March 8th and 21st. For these new arrivals and for the overload of buses and vans that are coming towards Kabul and other provinces, how would you say that the UNHCR is preparing these Afghan refugees and trying to prevent the potential spread of the virus nationwide?
It seems that Mr. Farhad is not here at the moment, so I'm just gonna.
No problem. Is Mr. Rahim back by any chance?
He'll be back in 10 minutes.
Okay, so we will wait for Mr. Rahim and Mr. Farhad to join us. While we're doing that, I will turn the conversation over to Ms. Khurram, who we were hoping to save this as the last question and end it off on a positive note. But we'll ask you now. There has been a lot of discussion around what peace looks like. Can you tell us about your vision of peace for Afghanistan?
Thank you. What exactly the peace means to people, it's not near the lack of insecurity. It is not about there is no war. It's only lack of the war cannot be translated into peace. Therefore, since the start of US-Taliban negotiations and during the informal intra-Afghan peace dialogues in Qatar and Moscow, there has been a lot of talks between the civil society, among civil society and other stakeholders on what exactly is the meaning of peace. And since the society and the fabric of Afghanistan society has changed over the last 15 years, definitely the gains, the achievements that has been achieved over the last 18 years are the examples of how Afghanistan tried and how hard the new generation of Afghanistan worked to be the change makers in a very tough situation. But considering the overall humanitarian crisis that COVID-19 might have on most of the political dynamics in different countries, and especially on peace processes, a while ago, the Secretary General of the United Nations called for a global ceasefire, and later on, the Security Council endorsed it. But we also had calls for ceasefire in Afghanistan, and the government called upon the Taliban to commit a ceasefire, but they have rejected that. And it's I guess this is very discouraging and disheartening to see that even after it has been months since the U.S. Taliban agreement has been signed in February 2020, and we can see any impact on the security situation. Even though if there is like relative peace in big cities, but the focus is now more on rural areas where military personnel and people living in rural areas are paying the highest cost. So we definitely need a breathing space, a conducive environment to negotiate peace. And without that, it will be very difficult to even think about having an intra-Afghan negotiations while no party is really committed to peace. But I'm optimistic still. I'm optimistic, and I see the light at the end of the tunnel, because in this important juncture of our history, I really hope that parties consider that COVID-19 knows no border. It doesn't know who Talib or who the government is, and COVID-19 will never wait for the negotiation to for the negotiators to reach a ceasefire, and it will definitely impact everybody. Doesn't matter where they live. So I hope that politicians leave their political goals and do not make it like above the prioritize. They should not right now prioritize political goals over the well-being and the public health. And I guess if all parties genuinely commit to fight against COVID-19, this like decades of war could not make the warring parties come to an agreement, but this COVID-19 could be a vehicle for peace in Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Aisha Jan, for your beautiful message and for remaining optimistic, even though someone like you, who I'm sure has done so much research on the issue, not only in regards to the pandemic and COVID-19, but obviously past struggles that Afghanistan has faced. For someone to have such honest and true knowledge about the situation and still remain optimistic gives hope to the rest of us, especially those of us who are not in Afghanistan and who are not able to see what's really going on over there right now. So thank you again for all the amazing work that you've done, and keep up on your wonderful journey. I can't wait one day, hopefully you can be an amazing lawyer or politician. We need more people like you. Inshallah, we'll see you up there as well. It looks like Dr. Rahim and Mr. Farhad, I think we've lost them on our Zoom call due to technical difficulties. So I'm going to turn over the conversation as a closing to Dr. Hashmi, who obviously has been a frontline worker and has seen the struggles that frontline workers have gone through throughout this pandemic in Afghanistan. Perhaps if you would like to make some closing remarks. You have already touched on the topic of the severity of the COVID-19 cases in Afghanistan, the preparedness of Afghanistan and the government, as well as the shortage of medical supplies. Is there a message that you were hoping to send us before we log off?
Well, the basic message is that I told you that most of the time when we are receiving some donations, some things, they are mostly going through NGOs or through government, which is not reaching to the hospital and the medical staff. And this is a big issue. So I cannot say that something, if you have some companies or some NGOs or organizations who are donating to Afghanistan or who are helping them. So it's the better way to send them directly to hospitals, which hospital management can distribute these things very easily or in a good manner to the medical staff than through the government. From the government side, we don't have any hope right now, and day by day we are getting disappointing from them. That is a huge problem for us, losing our lives even though we are struggling. We are in the front line, but don't have any things for the personal protection even. And also beside that, we don't have any facilities for further for the doctors. And also the basic problem is that we are trying to say to the government that make the isolations for those who are suspected for the COVID-19, and also for those who are active cases. Sometimes we can say that it's not a good thing. It's against the medical ethics, but still we are placing those who are suspected with those patients who are actively actives. The second thing that in one single rooms we placed more than 10, 12 beds, which is not good, and we don't have a good ventilation system for them. We're trying to tell the government that make some changes, give some budgets, but they are saying no. And as many of the economists, they say that we have a lot of budgets, but mostly we have a budget for the COVID-19 in Afghanistan, but actually this budget is they are spending them on nonsense. They are spending them like as media, where we cannot have the facility to reach them. In more than 55% of the Afghanistan people, they are not reaching to the media. So they're still trying. They say that we have spent millions of Afghanis on the social media and also on the TV announcements, which is not that much effective. Just spend a little amount of money on the ventilators, on some ventilation systems, and also isolation rooms, and also PP, which is very easy for them, but uh, they are not making them. Sorry, they are not actually providing them to the medical staff. And in this case, and also I would like to say to the pupils that please obey the commands, of obey the rules, which as the government are saying that stay at homes, uh, take the place, do not go to the places which are very heavy loaded, or there is a lot of cloth. Otherwise we are not able, and we are not able to cure them, or we are not able to treat them. And still I can say that we are not ready to face this problem in Afghanistan right now. We have a lot of problem in these things. So it's something like we can say that a miracle can happen, but this miracle is in the hand of people and also in the hand of government. But actually the government is not supporting us. As I told you that before, that mostly they are busy to show themselves, like they are showing in the media and in the people and the public that we are the heroes, we are the champions. But and actually they are nothing. They are just putting their doctors, their medical staff in a huge disaster, in a huge problems, which is, I don't know why they are doing like this. Sometimes they're saying that they are doing things by unknown mind, that no, just yeah, let's go and send these doctors to the danger. Just provide a simple kits, just provide a medical kit, just providing as a examination or sampling kits. It's very easy. A lot of people have the basic problem in right now. We have that why we are facing these problems is that every day more than 600 700 people are coming to the hospital for the test sampling, which they have the sign. But unfortunately, due to the leakage of the PCR machines for which we are confirming that the test is positive or negative, at the real time it takes 4 to 6 hours for to get the result. But we are giving this result in 72 hours to the pupils, which means that in 72 hours, 3 days, we are sending them back to the pupil who are not infected yet. And after 72 hours, this one person, he can spread this infection or this virus to more than 50 peoples. So these things we are doing like by our own hand. That's good. If you are suspected, so isolate them. We are trying to tell them to isolate them. They are, right now they give us the uh, our palace, Darlaman Palace, for the isolations. But this isolation is not for all or for common people. It's just for the VIPs who are interested to stay there. And just they are occupying the bed, but they are not staying in the hospital. Just say, okay, this bed is mine. Whenever I get the problem or when I get this respiratory distress, so I will come to the hospital. Otherwise, he's going there. He's on the he's between the people. So that's the big problem. And hope the government understands what the situation is. And if the government did not react at this times, so trust me, this problem will be more than disaster. It will make a more disaster than ever time. And as I told you that we are expecting that at the end of, and we cannot control this virus up to 10 months, in the next 10 months. So we are saying that maybe in this next year, up to next year, when the virus or this disease is going to be prolonged, we will lost more than 2.5 lakh people, or more than 3 lakh people we were lost during like this lack of facilities, lack of machineries. It's I can say that it will be a big disaster or a catastrophic disaster will happen, that the government will cannot say cannot collect them all. As like Italy, you say that at the beginning the government is also the same like our government. He was not paying attention to anyone. Nowadays they are crying. They are saying that what to do. So the same thing when a country like Italy, he is in such condition, but a country, a third world country like Afghanistan, he will face a lot of problem. It's a huge challenge for us. So hope the government understand, and hope the government not interfere in the doctors' work and the strategy they're making to control the virus. Actually, the government is not taking them seriously on their own side. Even though nowadays, like just they're recruiting directors or deputy directors of the hospital or for some medical institutions, they're just like politics. It's a politics. We are saying that this man is not capable for this seat. But again, we are seeing that no, he has some relation with the president. He has some relation with the ministers. So again, these people are in the high ranking, and they are making our plans. So which they are actually not even in the situation, or they are not the specialists of these things. Like just an engineer cannot make a plan for the doctor. The same thing is happening in Afghanistan, which is a big problem for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saib. And again, I thank you so much for the hard work and the passionate work that you're doing, putting your life at risk, and sending this message out to a government that obviously needs to hear it. And I hope your words are heard. I hope that the frontline workers receive the supplies and the medical PPE that they require to ensure that their safety is secure while working in hospitals.
And before I make a closing remark, I want to Mr. Rahim got cut off. I want to give the stage to him and ask him if he has any comments. Any closing remarks?
Thank you very much. I mean, it's been wonderful. I covered most of the points that I said, but I just continue from where Dr. Saib left. Dr. Hashimi, that like just like we have problems and fragility and challenges in the and we notice the lack of seriousness of government in the health sector, the same is visible in the economic sector as well, and government is not doing enough to do that. I've discussed about challenges a lot. I would only say that no matter what government is doing, we cannot do much complain about it. But what we could do is that we could pick up our pens. All those people who are coming from the health background, they could start writing and start suggesting and start publishing their ideas. The same goes for the people with economics background. The same goes for people with the social work. I would appeal everyone to come forward in this situation and help us avoid a dire humanitarian crisis that is around the corner, because next 3-4 months, lack of food, lack of supply is going to be challenging. So I would request first of all the former chief executive and our president to kindly put an end to it in this dire situation. We could request the Taliban to reply to a ceasefire request which is coming from across the world. If these two are done, our pain, our problems would be reduced a great deal. At the end, I would request and appeal everyone to come forward, donate, campaign, and make sure we ensure food supplies to people across Afghanistan, because if individuals, civil society organizations, we don't do that, governments, I mean, it's very difficult for them. I mean, we do have problems with government, but even with that, unless people stand, it's very difficult. So I would appeal everyone to come forward, donate, and let us ensure food for our people during this crisis situation while they are staying home. Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing today's event.
Thank you, Mr. Rahim.
So this brings us to the end of our virtual panel. I'd like to thank all of you, the panelists, Frishta John, for your work on an NGO front regarding education and the assistance that you provided children all across Afghanistan. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us today. Shoaib John, thank you for all of your analysis on the economy, on what Afghanistan is going through in this difficult time on our markets, both past and future. We are so grateful that you've shared your information with us, and I think it will be very useful to a lot of the individuals that have tuned in today. Aisha John, you are wonderful. You're a youth activist, and I can't express how proud we are of you as a fellow a young Afghan woman. I must tell you, you're inspiring, and continue on the path that you're going. I'm sure we'll see you in very big places. Mr. Farhad Nadirjan, for all of the assistance that you're providing United Nations refugees through the UNHCR. Thank you for all of your work. You too are putting yourself at risk, and as a person who's done so much for the individuals in terms of reintegration and for sustainable reintegration, we thank you for that. And again, Dr. Hashmi, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Lastly, but absolutely not leastly, Rohina John, thank you so much for allowing me to take part in this panel as a moderator. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in and participating, and for your interest in a conversation that is very important for both Afghanistan and for us who want to know what's going on with our country and our people. I'm going to turn it over to Rohina for some closing remarks. Again, thank you for the initiative.
Unfortunately, time does not permit us to have a Q&A session. With that being said, I want to thank all of the panelists for such a rich discussion, and your work is characterized as a rich commitment. Thank you for the audience for tuning in particular, a huge thank you to our panelists to giving up their evening and iftar. Stay safe and stay healthy, and goodbye.